Reggae really has changed in the last decade. It's been a phenomenal change, actually. In the beginning, it was about fusion. It was about contact. It was a communion of a brotherhood, a sisterhood of songwriting, recording, and encapsulating. At Studio One, they would arrive in the morning, the musicians. They would start work on rhythms. Songwriters would be there with pieces crafted. Singers would be there ready to sing those songs if they hadn't written them. Jamming sessions occurred. Singers would interact with songwriters, and a fusion came about. And the greatest moment was when the drummer went, 1, 2, 1, 2, and that rim shot came in, the bass line dropped, the pianist hit, and the rhythm kicked in, and then count into the vocal, and the singer began to sing, or the singers began to sing. That acoustic, that, I'm trying to find the word, not digital, what's before digital recording?
Analog.
That analog recording became a unique moment in time, forevermore. And no matter how many takes they did again, it would never be the take they just did. You'd often get several takes of a song, and sometimes Coxsone would release different versions, and Treasure Island and so on. But that was unique. And when the Soul Vendors came here for their tour in 1967 with Ken Booth and Alton Ellis and Jackie Mittoo, that was a band from Jamaica coming on tour for the first time. Prince Buster came here, Dave and Ansel Collins, the Upsetters came here. This was the first wave in the 60s because the music blossomed, because mods and then skinheads fell in love with it. So you had the musicians and the singers and the engineer, who was so important, and the producer and the arranger and the guy who did the auditions, the Jackie Mittoo, the driving force, the musical director, if you like, at Studio One. I'm using Studio One as an example. It happened at Motown, and we all know how it happened in Chicago and so on. But this was where it was happening in Jamaica. And what happened was very, very special. And those rhythms became the benchmark. They became the template for what is now reggae. Because reggae now spends most of its time looking over its shoulder at what happened 30 years ago. I've lost count of the numerous versions there have been of old rhythms, rehashed, rebuilt, restructured. More and more and more and more and more. And it all started then. So when those bands went on the road, when the Wailers, Bob, Peter and Bunny, appeared at the Greyhound pub in Fulham Palace Road for the launch of the Catch a Fire album, with the Barrett brothers on bass and drum and Wire Lindo, that was 6 people. And when that rim shot hit and they started singing Soul Rebel, you would never ever forget that moment. When he sung No Woman No Cry live at the Lyceum, no one who was there will ever forget it. I mean, I wasn't at that concert, but when you hear the live recording, you can feel what was happening. So that's how it came from studio to concert. From Black Uhura with Sly and Robbie at Channel 1 to the Rainbow, Finsbury Park, London. Because they carried the whole thing with them. It was in them. It was in the instruments they played, their interpretation, their fusion, what they were feeding off, watching the bass player and the drum player, the drummer working off each other, that breakdown of the music, the artist responding to that, and also the intensity of the recordings. In those days, a young singer would audition on a Sunday afternoon at Studio One, and if he didn't pass the audition, he was dejected. But he would often come back, and if he did pass the audition, he then got the chance to make the recording of the song that he'd made. And if he didn't get it right after 3 or 4 takes, one of the studio players or the musical director would say, if you don't get it right, we'll turn this into an instrumental. So there was this artistic pressure, this intense adrenaline rush to get it right, because if you screwed up halfway through the song, all the musicians had to stop, the clock was ticking, they got paid per side, Come on, I mean, we've seen it in The Harder They Come. That's how it was when Jimmy Cliff's singing in the studio and the musicians were like, chop, I've got to start again. And that's exactly how it was. So what you had was this tremendous intensity and this preparation, rehearsal, checking the harmonies were right. The Wailers rehearsed under the guidance of Joe Higgs for a long time before they auditioned for Coxon at Studio One. There was that attention to detail, getting it right, always being prepared so that when you walk in and you start, you're on it, you're on your game, you're delivering, you have it. That has changed dramatically because of digital recording. You can punch anything in, you can lay your rhythm and repeat it 1,000 times, you can loop, you can sample. That is, of course, in itself an incredibly creative process and can be extremely exciting. When that young lad got that Casio music box in 1985 and went, little did he know that the Casio music box he was playing around with in Kingston and he took to King Jammies would turn out to be under Miss Sleng teng. But it was. And music must develop, and technology is moving ahead so fast, and globalization means that we are accessing things far quicker than we ever could before, that people are going to experiment. Jamaica's always been in love with show business, with performance. And I think one of the most exciting things about Jamaica now and in the past has been its fascination for performance. Traditionally, a strong theatre background there, a strong dance background, dance meaning in classical dance and so on. The University of West Indies, of course, is Jamaica's passion for learning and studying. The schooling system, and those terribly underprivileged children, of course, that don't get a chance. But, you know, Jamaica's trying its best with the help of communities up in England. We're part of the Jamaica Basic Schools Foundation. I'm involved in that in London, raising money to help the basic schools in Jamaica. But the whole concept of Sunsplash and then Sunfest, and the dances and shows they have in Kingston, on the beaches and so on, and island-wide, the Rebel Salute up in Manchester, where Tony Rebel comes from. There's this area of energy where often new blood comes through, and vibes get spotted and picked up on. So there's a lot happening there. There are new young producers, Don Corleone Records, people like him, young lads who are creative and coming up with ideas and building rhythms that are not entirely traditional reggae, have a slight fusion of hip-hop, the Amharic rhythm, these rhythms. The Diwali rhythm created by Stephen Marsden was a phenomenal masterpiece, just so exciting and so untypically reggae, in the way that Sly Dunbar and Robbie Shakespeare created the Murder, She Wrote rhythm, which was inspired by Bhangra music. So there's a lot happening, a lot of influences, and it's good to see reggae bouncing into urban America as much as it's taking notice of what urban America is doing in the way of hip-hop. That's a positive thing. And I get to understand that major developments are being made on the island down in Port Antonio in terms of developing it from a tourist point of view, because it is a beautiful part of the world. The heart of the island is beautiful, into Clarendon, up into Westmoreland, Lucy, Trelawney, and you know, you can escape and literally up into the hills, and there is still that element of traditional Jamaican lifestyle, you know, real food, you know, fish and bami and festival, and a lifestyle which is much more laid back. In the last year, 2 years, there have been peace movements in Jamaica where the Ghetto leaders have got together to try and bring back some stability. There has traditionally been, a history of gang warfare, particularly in the Kingston ghettos, power bases and areas where people stay and not going into another area. The whole issue of tribalism, divide and rule, if you like, which Little Roy sung out against when he made the song Tribal War. We don't want no more of that. Killing our own black brothers and sisters over tribalism. So as much as that can be eradicated, the better for Jamaica. And the Jamaican politicians should do all they can to encourage that. But the Jamaican politics has been tied up with violence over the years, sadly, because of the power bases in the areas where the voters where the voting is strongest for a particular party, and the power that comes with that. Michael Manley, one of Jamaica's greatest prime ministers, once said that Jamaicans are the greatest entrepreneurs in the world. And I think he's right. When I first saw a Jamaican selling individual Craven cigarettes from a packet on a street corner in 1979, I said to myself, well, there's initiative. Well, that sounds patronising, but I'd never seen that before. I'd lived in England. I'd never seen an individual on a street corner selling a person on a street corner selling individual Craven cigarettes, or any cigarette. And because I'd come face to face, bang, with poverty, the like of which I'd never seen before, in some of those desolate shanty towns, and how people scrape a living together, selling oranges and fruits and so on. So, yes, the greatest entrepreneurs, and they're great travellers too. I don't think there's a country on the planet where you won't find Jamaicans. They've always, set sail and headed off into the West to develop. I mean, look at the Jamaican community in England, in Manchester, Birmingham, London. Look at what those people had to go through in terms of the racism they had to suffer at the hands of English people to come and do jobs that white people did not want to do. And to go through that, having lived in the Caribbean all your life and suffer bitterly cold winters in England, freezing in one room with a little heater and your wife and a baby. I mean, that's tough. So, great entrepreneurs. And I think that Jamaica, politically, there needs to be growth and development there, new young bloods coming in, new young politicians with new ideas. Barry Gordon said to me earlier this year when we were talking about the state of Jamaican politics and government, and he said, in the way that New Labour came in and changed the face of British politics and the Tory party went to the wall, in the same way I agree with Barry G that there needs to be an infusion of new blood and new ideas and new young energy needs to come into Jamaican government and bring things up to a new level, a higher level. Bureaucracy, stumbling through that bureaucracy which was preventing things succeeding and people achieving, I think.